YouTube and see if I can find this live. I don't see it. Of course, I don't see it. But let's see if I can find it. No, I can't find it. All right. There's let's see. Live webinar. It is live streaming on YouTube. Okay, we are on YouTube. I am going to. Okay. Did you hear an echo? Is that just me? All right, I'm just going to drop this in our community and we'll start. See who's going to join us. Okay. So we are live, and I actually don't know how many people we have with us. This is a new platform for me. So for those of you joining us live, thanks for joining. We are here today live with Justine and Marissa, who are the authors of this book, The Grieving Therapist. How to caring for yourself and your clients when it feels like the end of the world. Justine and Larissa, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Do you ladies want to take a moment to introduce yourselves other than the fact that you wrote this book? I know you wrote another book and
Mm-hmm.
you're doing a couple of other things in life.
Yes, we are always doing a couple other things in life. Larissa and I also co-wrote the book Starship Therapies, using therapeutic fan fiction to rewrite your life, which you can see behind me here with Kirk and Spock. It's a self-help book for anyone who would hate a self-help book, harnessing the power of the stories that we love to change the story of our lives. In addition to the writing work that we do, I am a student at Southwestern College in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I am studying to get my PhD in visionary practice and regenerative leadership. And that is my focus in the world right now, although I still do supervise junior therapists and occasionally teach, which I will be doing in the spring.
Okay, and for those of us who don't know, because I know because you and I talked before, but can you explain what is regenerative leadership?
Yeah, so visionary practice and regenerative leadership is all about looking at the systems in our lives and finding what isn't working, and getting curious with the people or entities that exist within those systems and asking them what might help them the best. I am curious in my research about the system that is the therapy industry, specifically in the United States, because that's where I live, and how we might return the field of psychotherapy to the beautiful field of wildflowers it once was, and getting away from the now very regimented gardening siloed system that we have now.
Yeah, thank you. Larissa?
Yes, I'm Larissa. I do a lot of things in my professional life, and the hub, the center of that, is being a practicing clinician, which I've been for a little over 10 years now, if you count my practicum, which is sort of wild to say. But also, I know like younger me would be super jazzed that we survived grad school and made it all the way here. So I'm a practicing clinician, a licensed marriage and family therapist. I help to co-run, co-manage, co-lead a vibrant, medium-sized group practice in Chicago, Illinois called Empowered Therapy, where I am a supervisor and the chief of clinical staff, which is, I don't know, like parts of me really love that title. And then other parts are me like, it's a lot of looking at spreadsheets sometimes. But I really like the variety of the work in terms of supervising, managing, working directly with clients. And very much at this stage in my career, see someone who is working within kind of a series of labyrinthian and flawed systems to practice a lot of harm reduction models and really help empower clinicians to be the very best activists and healers that they can in this very precarious landscape, and to empower clients to be the change that they want to see in the world.
Thank you. So you wrote the. So first of all, I just want to mention that we have Alexandra from the UK, and we have Marcel from Canada, and we have Rachel from Michigan, and Elizabeth from Virginia, and Ingrid from Norway. So we have people from all over, which is really cool. And this is
Oh,
what I love about our community. Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
Ingrid, this is Thor.
Thor.
I love it.
I just thought, the someone from Norway
The
might appreciate
connection.
knowing that a Norse god was here with us.
Cool. So so you wrote this book, The Grieving Therapist, caring for yourself and your clients when it feels like the end of the world. I don't know about you. For me, December 2024 feels more like the end of the world than it felt in 2020. That's just my own personal experience. I know that some people have different experiences. Can you share a little bit about what was going on for you, for both of you, and what inspired? How did you come up with writing this book?
Larissa, would you like to get us rolling with that, or would you like me to?
I would be happy to get us rolling with it as long as the plumbing that's happening in my building is quiet. So we're going to seize the day over here, folks. I think it's important to really give credit where credit was due. And that is to say that really Justine and our fabulous editor over at North Atlantic Books, Shana Keels, came up with this idea of writing a book about grieving specifically for therapists. It was at this period right during like the dawn of the second year of the pandemic. And both Justine and Shana really felt like there wasn't a resource out there for working clinicians and supervisors and students thinking about going into the field that really started to get into these thorny cross sections of issues around grief and climate collapse and existential dread and sort of the careening atrocity that is both our national and our global politics. And they were very jazzed about this idea. And I would say that at the time, I pull from a lot of internal family systems language here, so I'm going to use parts. At the time that they brought this idea to me, none of my parts were jazzed about this idea, though many of them did see like the value in the work. I was like, I just can't do this. I don't know how to care for myself or my clients right now. It feels like the end of the world is right now, and I can sort of like barely get myself going. How in the world am I going to write a book about this? But this is the beauty of having a co-author and really having the best friend that I'm so grateful and lucky to have in Justine, because whereas I have the gift of really sitting in what it's going to be like to do a thing, Justine has the gift of being able to see what it will be like at the end, what the gem will be once it's all shiny and polished and burnished. And she really championed this, and she would not let it go. And she she knew how to convince me, because she brought it back to meaning making. She brought it back to, this is going to be so meaningful to our colleagues and our friends. This is a way that we help them. And that was a point where, for me, both as a professional and as a person, I felt so disempowered. I felt so disenfranchised. I'd been inside for almost a year because both my husband and I have chronic illness. I felt so separated from people. I wasn't convinced that I was doing what I needed to do to help my community, let alone this place that we call home, the planet. And so Justine was very wise, and she knew how to get me going with this project, which was, this is how we help. This is how we step forward. And so we did that together.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. And what was happening for me, the reason that I was so insistent that this was going to help our friends, I felt so unseen during the pandemic. And I take nothing away from first responders. The work that they did was horrific. What they saw was atrocious, and traumatizing. And then who did they come talk to all of that horror and atrocity with? Us.
Yeah.
And I, don't get me wrong, I didn't want anyone to send me a pizza or to clang their pans out on their balcony for me. The healthcare workers didn't want that either.
Yeah.
But I just felt as though in the conversation around, like, who is suffering, who is giving, who are the heroes of this time, therapists were really just completely unseen, and we were suffering
Yes.
At such a high rate, and we were doing the work that felt like Groundhog Day every day, same conversation 8 times a day.
Right. Right.
And it was really painful, and I felt like, Larissa and I had each other, but I didn't know who else had someone they could lean on. And
Yeah.
so my hope was we would create this book that felt like a community space for people to come and find solace.
Yes, we
Yeah. And
really set ourselves up
yeah.
with like a hard task because we wanted the book to be both the act of reading it to feel like you were moving into community, and we wanted there to be like concrete tools that you could use to help yourself and help your clients.
Yeah, so one thing I appreciate about the book is the community sense. You described for the reader, you kind of have the reader visualize sitting around the campfire and be with your people, right? Be with the tribe. I'm curious about that. Before we get into the kind of like the content of the book, how did you come up with that campfire?
Do you
Larissa,
remember,
how did we
Justine?
come up with the campfire?
That's an archetype that had been rolling around in our minds for a really long time. And what crystallized it for me, I don't know if any of the folks who are listening right now or into the future are familiar with the indie video game Outer Wilds.
Oh, that's right. This was big Outer Wilds energy.
This was big Outer Wilds energy, which is, I don't want to give anything away if you haven't played it. It is a fabulous game. Even if you maybe haven't been a gamer in a long time, I really recommend. But one of sort of the centerpieces of the game is coming back to finding lost friends around a fire. And the avatar you play is going on a journey to find your friends.
Yeah, that's great. And one more thing that I want to mention that I really appreciate about the book is how vulnerable you both are with sharing. So it's not just a set of tools to the reader, but it's here, look at us. We're struggling. We don't know, we live in the same uncertainty. And then here are some tools that helped us and can probably help you. So I appreciate that. I think that that's real writing, right? Like you're being vulnerable and real and not trying to hide behind anything.
Thank you. This is the part of the process where Larissa and I joke that we are Kirk and Spock from Star Trek, the original series. I am Kirk and she is Spock. And this was a moment where my Kirkiness really shone through when I said, Larissa, we'll write this book and we'll help everybody. because we have already felt these things. We don't
Yeah.
need to feel them again. And she, in her wise Spockiness, said, well, of course we're going to feel them again. As we're writing this, we will re-experience everything that we're
Yeah.
talking about. And I said, of course we won't. um, and the reality, of course, was that she was right. And we spent 9 months processing the grief,
Yeah.
uh, which was, and I can speak for myself, just incredibly healing, even in its unbelievable, painful, experience.
Yeah. I'm just realizing now that before we hit record, we said we'll start with a meditation, and here we are, 15 minutes later. Maybe we'll spend time ending our conversation with meditation. Would you be open to
I
that?
love that. Totally.
Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
All right. Yeah, that would be a good thing to do. So I want to talk about health. um you both share your, some health related issues. Justine, I think it was you who described the COVID or the long COVID experience as kind of like a hybrid of depression and ADHD, just inability to
Yep.
focus, and how
Mm-hmm.
hard it was to see clients, and sometimes you had
Yeah.
to cancel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did everything I could to not get COVID, as we all did. Um, and it happened, as it did for so many people. And I talk in the book about how scared I was, because I also deal with some chronic illness, and I, you know, I'm a severe chronic asthmatic, and we didn't know that much about COVID other than it attacks the lungs.
Right.
And I was really scared, um, because I didn't know what was going to happen.
Mhm.
And at that time, there was a vaccine, and I had been vaccinated, and we still didn't know that much.
Yeah.
Um, so I was just really terrified about what was going to happen. And the illness itself, the physical symptoms were not great, but I wound up not being hospitalized or any of the horrible stuff that you hear. Um,
Yeah.
but what I didn't know, and what I was very glad that some of the people in my life said, "Hey, no one's talking about this, but there are mental health symptoms that come with this."
Yeah.
Um, and I was glad for that information, because I did feel a bit like I was losing my mind. But really, it was a depressive episode, and this incredible lack of focus that I could feel in my body wasn't mine.
Yeah.
Because I have experienced depressive episodes, um, and I knew when they were mine, and I knew
Yeah.
that this came from somewhere else. Um, but the troubling thing about it was that because it wasn't mine, I couldn't seem to treat it.
Yeah.
And I just had to wait until it passed through my system. And there are ways in which I am different than I was before I had COVID. Um, and that comes with grief and in itself. But also, the outcome was that I have become a lot more compassionate with myself, and I've slowed down, and I'm a lot more mindful about what I'm taking on and how I'm taking care of myself. So that was
Yeah.
the poorly wrapped gift of that experience.
Yeah. One of the things that you also talk about in the book is how you shifted your perception about working virtually, that you initially was very resistant to, and then eventually became, now you don't do clinical work, right? Like direct client work, um, but after you, until you got to that point, you worked solely virtually. Is that right?
Yeah, I had this very firm belief that therapy could only be done in person.
Yeah.
Um,
Like
I,
many of us did.
Yeah, right, like many people did, and, except under certain circumstances, if someone's in acute crisis, I'll do a phone call, right? But when the pandemic hit, as I said, I deal with a lung condition. So as soon as I heard COVID was on the rise, I closed my office and I made everyone go virtual. And I feel like the person that suffered the most with that was me, not my
Yeah.
clients. Most of them adapted a lot more quickly than I did to that
Yeah.
change. I was like, I miss my office and I miss my mini fridge and I and I miss that moment when, I go out to the waiting room and I greet my client and we walk in together, and I missed that so much.
Yeah.
Um, but eventually I discovered that working virtually was better for me in just the work style and lifestyle that I had.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I consider myself retired from direct client care, and the final 4 or 5 years of my practice were all virtual.
Yeah. Um, Larissa, I'm wondering if we can go back to talking about health. One of the things that you say in the book is that there is a tendency to talk about health and illness if there's as if there were only two possible states, so kind of like a binary. You're either healthy or
Yes.
not, and that
Mhm.
was clearly not the case for most people during the pandemic.
Right. I mean, clearly not the case for most people during the pandemic, but then I think that also was an opportunity to really go back and question some of the more polarized paradigms that we've been handed in our mainstream society, modern society, around this idea that you're either healthy or sick. It certainly wasn't true during the pandemic, and I would argue it wasn't true pre-pandemic either. Um,
And
I think
post
it
pandemic, right?
right, and
It's
post,
right. It's just
absolutely.
yeah.
Mhm, mhm. And it's one of those things that we talk about this in the book, and we, as Justine, I think, has spoken to earlier, had to embody first, which is living through that internal questioning of what does it mean to be sick and healthy at the same time, and then how to answer that question of how do I know that I'm well enough to see my clients? How do I know that I'm well enough to supervise? If it truly is this dance back and forth across the binary, how do I know? How do I figure that out? Do I answer that internally within myself? Do I have trusted colleagues? Do I go to community? Is it going to be different if I go to virtual community? And so these were things that we were very much exploring in real time together as we were supporting one another. And then really talk about in the book that importance of having trusted colleagues, both that are like peer to peer, but then also having some really solid supervisors or clinical leaders that you can go to who can sit with you and help you figure out at what point in this dance of illness and wellness do I need to prioritize my own care and take a beat and reschedule sessions? And when I do that, how do I communicate that to my clients? I think so many of us, myself very much included, I walked into the field with this idea that like I needed to win the battle for structure because Carl Whitaker said that, and that was really hammered home in therapy grad school. I win the battle for structure so clients can win the battle of initiation, and structure is like scheduling and consistency. So I have to be here all the time, and
Yeah.
almost as if like, I'm either with my clients and as far as they know, I'm just like a non-playable character sitting in my office when they're not here, and I activate when they walk in. And though it's weird to say now, for parts of me for a very long time, that was very attractive. This idea of this version of me that was this strong, consistent therapeutic presence,
Mm-hmm.
and sitting with the reality of the fact that we're constantly in different states of health and illness really challenged, I think, that artificial idea that I had for myself. And I really had to learn to notice, where am I at? How do I listen? And how do
Yeah.
I take pause? And how do I communicate that really clearly to my clients? Because it's by doing that that I can maintain that sense of safety with them, but then also be really modeling some effective self-care as well.
Yeah, and we'll get to self-care in just a minute because I do want to talk about self-care and what, maybe you can share with our community members how to engage in self-care. But I think one of the other things, and just related to what you just said, Larissa, is that there was an unprecedented need for mental health. It's like everybody needed a therapist. And one of the things that I saw, among some of my colleagues is that, therapists, we want to help. So and like this inability to say no, and people just working themselves to the ground, just not saying no and just taking more and more and more clients, and really got to like, really, there are a lot of therapists who got completely burned out during the pandemic. Have you, I'm wondering if you had the same observations or experiences.
I would say
Larissa, would you
yes.
like would you like to tell a story?
Sure, I sure would. Yes, I observed that. And I would say, Rotem, it sounds like you were talking about me. This was me the first year of the pandemic. I would see like 40, 50 clients every week. I would work for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours straight. And then at the end of the day, when I felt like my eyes were going to fall out of my head, I would turn off all the lights in my bedroom office. And I would turn on the little electric fire that played on the TV screen in the bedroom. And I would just lay there. And I would just silently cry. And I did that. That was my norm for most of the first year. And I don't know why I'm qualifying it. It was the norm for the first year and into the second year. And I got myself to a place where I was so burnt out that I couldn't remember what it felt like to not be burnt out. When I go back and access those memories, every moment was painful, different gradations of
Wow.
pain, sometimes physical, sometimes mental and emotional, but it was always painful.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to say no for exactly what you're speaking to, because I felt like, well, this is a crisis point and I have to show up. I can't
Yeah.
tell people no. They're counting on me. Clients are counting on me. Supervisees are counting on me. And it really wasn't until the second year when my burnout got to a place where I was living with all of this pain and trying to be like, well, this pain means I'm doing things that are meaningful, right? Which speaks
Yeah.
to a tool that we talk about in the book called the pain paradox. But it really wasn't until the second year when I realized that I was starting to just hate everything.
Mm.
And that was the moment when I realized I had to fundamentally change what I was doing, because I had lost the ability to enjoy any of it. Um,
Yeah.
and there was a short period of time where I thought, like, maybe I'm just going to have to leave. Maybe there's not a way for me to continue. Um, and as I think so often happens for, like, when you're working in the mental health space, but especially for therapists, this was like the beginning of this very deep internal journey that I had to do, which was face a lot of my own painful history around what does it mean to take care of myself? What does it mean to have limits?
Yeah.
And it was so worthwhile. And I remember thinking at the time, once I moved through that, that was probably like what, by the time I hit like mid 2023, I was like, beautiful. I did all this work. The book's coming out. I'm done. I've got this.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
then I just want to do a trigger warning in case anybody's struggling with like some life-threatening illness. At midway through this year, 2024, I had a cancer scare. I don't have cancer, but for a couple months, it was looking like I might. And I had to go through a bunch of different procedures and a pretty painful surgery. And as I was moving through that in the beginning and prepping for it, I was revisiting all these moments in the book around, okay, how do I talk to myself about this? How do I talk to my clients about this? How do I prep my practice for it? And there were a few moments where I remember just like standing here in my home office being like, why is this so hard again? I thought I did this before. I thought I had the answers. It's all right here. Um, and it was a beautiful, humbling moment, that reminder that like change, it's not a line and it's not a circle, it's a spiral. And I was at a different place on that
Yeah.
spiral.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I want to, first of all, I wanted to invite our members who are live with us to drop some questions for Larissa and Justine in the chat. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask. And I want to shift our conversation to talk a little bit more specifically about self care. In each chapter of the book, you share some self care strategies. So I'm wondering if you can share some of the maybe the most effective or your favorites or whatever you feel like sharing, so we can take something concrete out of it and implement it in our own lives.
Yeah. So, where were you going to go, Larissa?
I'll do like maybe I was thinking maybe I'll do a quick plug for the pain paradox one, the grieving tool, the pain paradox, since I sort of introed it, and then I want to hand it
Mm-hmm.
over to you
Yeah.
because I've been
Um,
talking for a minute.
well, can I say something? Just like
No.
Yes, you can.
just
You're allowed.
thank you for sharing your journey with all of that. I know this might make you weepy, but I must share
Okay.
um that it felt so much like Frodo's journey. And when you were talking about the pain you experienced and you couldn't feel joy anymore, all I could think was like I've forgotten the sound of water and the feel of grass and the taste of strawberries. Um, but then the Eagles came. Um,
You've always been very good at calling down the Eagles, Justine.
oh. Yes, but please talk about the pain paradox.
So yes, the pain paradox, it's a lot like what it sounds. I think as I spoke for myself earlier, this is not like unique for me, right? That I think many of us come to healing professions because we have experienced profound hurt. Um, and we've also experienced the power of healing, right? And so often moving through that specific kind of grieving and healing journey, we come out the other side and we're like, wow, this was so meaningful. I feel very changed. I think about the people or the person who helped me on this. Often for many of us, it was one or two therapists. And so this is a very common story and journey that clinicians take that bring them to the field of psychotherapy. And it's rooted in that experience of pain and then finding someone to help us heal it. And so the paradox of that is that we can, as clinicians, get caught up in this idea that, well, if I'm feeling discomfort or I'm feeling pain, that's how I know the meaning is happening. That's how I know I'm doing the good work, the important work, right? If it's feeling rough, I should just lean all the way in. And that's true to a certain extent. And if it's all pain all the time, then that's where we start to see that we are tipping into places of being self sacrificing. That's where we can see that we're making choices where we don't see that maybe we are modeling a way of being in the world that doesn't honor ourselves and the care for others. And so the pain paradox is a real invitation. It's like a new lens, a way to see yourself, which is to really sit down as a clinician and to think, okay, what drew me to this field? What feels meaningful in my clinical work? And if it keeps coming back to moments of pain and moments of healing, the invitation is let's really expand this meaning making idea and how we define doing important things to encompass, like you said so beautifully, Justine, quoting from the Lord of the Rings, the sound of water and the feeling of real joy, because these things are so meaningful too.
Yeah, I think I think it's so important to keep reminding ourselves of that, because sometimes you just forget, right? Like you're so absorbed with what you do with the work, and you forget what you do. And the way I explain to friends and neighbors and people who are not therapists, it's not just a job. What we do is very, very different than, you know, whatever. My neighbor who goes to a bank and does some financial consulting, and it's just it's very, very different. It's more like, I forget who said it. It's more like a mission than um, just a profession.
Yes, and just to get macro for a second, the systems in which we work sometimes leverage the pain paradox to get us to work harder, longer, faster, um, and especially for newer clinicians who want to, want to be good and want to serve. We we must always be mindful about whether we are discussing our personal burnout, which requires self-care, or moral injury, which requires community activism.
Yeah. Okay, can we talk maybe about one or two more self-care tools that therapists can use, and then we can do meditation?
Hmm. Yeah. And actually, I think it's beautiful that we're having meditation at the end, because that after this conversation about pain and grief and loss, and might be nice to come back.
Yes,
um,
absolutely.
yeah, I would love to spend a few minutes on a tool we call Return to Sender, which is about noticing inside of yourself those gifts from specifically your family of origin, and getting curious about which gifts you want to keep and which gifts you would like to return to sender. Um, and we all have gifts from our family of origin. And even though we call them gifts, that doesn't mean we like them. I can speak from my personal experience. My mother's gift, or my mother's love language, was gift giving. And they were gifts she wanted to give, not gifts people wanted to receive. Uh, and so I wound up, she has now been off this plane of existence for 5 years. But I have still many of the gifts. And I have been trying to be mindful in these literal gifts, asking myself, is is this something that serves me, or is this something that I feel I am keeping simply because she gave it to me?
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes Larissa and I joke and call this Marie Kondoing. Marie Kondo had a real moment with her, does this spark joy? And if it doesn't spark joy, let it go. Um, but our invitation is to ask yourself, does this serve me? Um, and an example that I would use when I was doing therapy with clients was, you were given this shame sweater. It is the sweater of shame.
Mm.
It was gifted to you by your parent. It was gifted to your parent from their parent and from their parent and from all the way back through our ancestry, right? And you now have this sweater that was woven of shame. Why is it in your drawer? Well, it was gifted to me. Okay, it was. You are not wrong. You were gifted that sweater woven of shame. Does it serve you? Well, no, it hurts me. It hurts me that it's here in my drawer. It hurts me that I feel like I have to put it on when I visit my family. It it hurts me. It doesn't serve me. Okay. What would happen if we sent it back to the ancestors? Oh, but they gave it to me. I can't give it back. Okay. Can we resurface it? Can we repurpose it? Can we unwind it and make something new? Could we give it a new name? Yes, it was woven of shame, but maybe we put a nice brooch on it. And now it's a new sweater that we call the survivor sweater. And we feel proud to wear it. And so the tool of return to sender is, opening the ephemeral box of gifts and asking yourself, does this serve me? Does this hurt me? Oh, or am I not sure? And it's going to go in the maybe pile that we all make when we're cleansing our closets.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As you're describing it, Justine, it's also occurring to me that there's so many gifts or sort of pseudo gifts that we receive from a lot of different systems that we find ourselves a part of. Like, I think young clinicians receive a lot of gifts that have made its way down through the generations of the clinicians, therapists, psychoanalysts that came before. And something that is really lovely to see is I really do feel like this up and coming generation of clinicians is doing a really beautiful job embodying this idea of return to sender, sitting with, for example, that gift of being the tabula rasa, the idea that like to be a solid, stalwart guide, you got to do a face. And I just see so many clinicians questioning that, unraveling it, and deciding, what are the elements of this to keep, right? Because the client-clinician relationship it's very unique and it's unbalanced for a reason. It's very important to be very mindful about things like disclosure, and you need to like use your facial expressions mindfully. But this idea that you got to just be like a neutral faced person, I mean, that's a gift that I really see folks questioning and passing back left, right, and center, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, I think they should teach it in graduate schools.
When I teach, they do.
There you go. There we go. You can start something, Justine.
I'm trying.
Yeah. Okay. Do we want to do a little meditation before we move on to our next clients or meeting or whatever we do?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
You want to take us out, Justine?
I will. Friends at home, this is an invitation to meditate, not an obligation. So if you would like to just sit quietly and listen, which is kind of meditating anyway, feel free. Or if you want to take this moment to, I don't know, play with your fidget or color in a coloring book, that's totally fine too. But if you would care to join me, find a comfortable spot, whatever that means and is available to you right now. Eyes can be open or closed, whatever serves you best in this moment. And take a nice deep breath in and let it go. Coming into this space where for the next few minutes, there's nowhere else you need to be and nothing else you need to be doing. This time is just for you. So give yourself permission to take those things that work and leave all the rest behind. I'll be offering you some guidance in this meditation. You're welcome to follow my words or allow them to gently come and go from your awareness naturally as they will. You look around yourself, and at first, your surroundings seem like a desolate wilderness. It feels as though you are a weary and lonesome traveler who has been beset on all sides by tribulations, with nary a friend or companion in sight. You reflect on the difficulties you've had in your own life and the collective strife that feels so close the past few years. But just as it begins to feel as if all hope is lost, you peer through the trees, such a dark shade of green that they almost appear black, and you make out a dim spark of orange. With cautious optimism, you walk towards this flash, and with each step, the spark grows brighter. After a while, your ears prick at the sound of laughter and human voices. How long has it been since you've gathered with others in a felt sense of community? Oh, look, another arrival, calls a voice from up ahead. You step into a clearing with a blazing campfire in the center, surrounded by many inviting faces. As you stand awestruck and overwhelmed, one of your kin hands you a steaming mug, while another makes room around the fire. Welcome, your friend says, as you sit down in the circle and take in the faces of your fellows. You greet each companion in kind and pause on their face for a moment. You want to remember who is here at the campfire with you. This community has been waiting for you. You have all been through so much, but now you are finally here, joined together to share in the journey to come. Take a moment and consider what you want to share with this community about both your trials and your triumphs. Share with them what feels important to you in this moment. Allow your fellows the chance to respond. Thank them for their presence. And take one final look around the circle. You want to remember each face and each message. You want to remember this feeling. It is now time to take this feeling of community back into the ordinary world. Slowly start making your way back to this ordinary world and noticing sounds in the room and thoughts in your mind. And take all the time that you need. And when you're ready, return to the virtual space that we all share together and open your eyes.
Ooh, that was really, really good. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Justine. Um, and thank you both again for taking the time and talking to us. We all need that. We're gonna have more conversations like this in our community with people who can help inspire us. When I mention your book again, The Grieving Therapist. Um, Thank you so much for your time, Justine and Larissa. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much. It was
Yeah,
an honor
thank
to
you
be
for
here.
having us.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for joining us. We will make this conversation available later for rewatch or watching for people who couldn't join us live. Uh, Really quickly, Justine and Larissa, if you can leave your browsers on, because it kind of uploads from your browser to whatever the platform. So, yeah, it shouldn't take long. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.